everyone, and welcome to the Popcorn Bucket List, the podcast that keeps your movie bucket list up to date because those 1,000 movies to see before you die lists are just too daunting. I'm your host and apocalyptic audio engineer, Gracie, and with me is Darrell, the silent film star, and Sarah, the extraterrestrial vegetation evaluator. How are you guys doing today?
Great. Doing great.
Good. Doing good.
This week, we are talking about modern silent films. For those who don't listen to our episodes upon release, A Quiet Place Part 2 just came out Memorial Day weekend, smashing pandemic records with a $57 million opening weekend. So we figured now is as good a time as any to discuss movies with little to no dialogue. Obviously, silent films haven't been fashionable since the late 1920s, but there has been a few notable examples in recent years. Could they be making a comeback? Probably not, but we should probably at least talk about it for an episode. So Darrell, what do you consider to be a silent film in the modern age?
Okay, yeah. For the most part, of course, it's like there has to be only a little bit of dialogue, but nowadays, of course, it's hard to tell stories without dialogue because we're so used to it. So, there's a classic movie like The Artist, which is literally just like a silent film made in 2011. But then I think movies like Dunkirk. Dunkirk's a good example because it's not completely silent. There's obviously dialogue, but it's all driven by sound. It's all driven by like sound effects and not dialogue. It's driven more by action. And I think especially for Christopher Nolan, it's definitely a silent film because he loves to talk. And in this one there's like they don't. It's like a 76-page screenplay or something, and it's an hour and 40-minute movie. That's because there's like so little dialogue, and so that's one where I would say definitely like that is kind of a silent film because it's all driven by action, and there's not a whole lot of talking. But what do you think, Sarah? Like, what do you consider a silent film nowadays?
I think like as long as something is a mostly silent film, then it still is, something that audience nowadays is not used to at all. And if you can like tell your story and make an impact with minimal dialogue, I think you're, doing a good job as like a standout, mostly silent film. Um, I feel like also it's like with Shaun the Sheep, the movie, I feel like it's kind of easy to do that for like a kids movie because as long as you're like keeping attention with like movement and color and music, then like that really pulls the movie forward as well. But also I think still like very uh it's a great movie. I love Shaun the Sheep, the movie. I saw it in theaters actually. But yeah, I think mostly silent movies are today's silent movies. It's really hard to not say anything at all in a modern movie.
I think it's an interesting excuse me concept, the silent film in modern age, because what we classify as a silent film now is little to no dialogue, but like movies that have little to no dialogue often you know expect a score to match, like to bring across the emotion that we're needing. And I think that I mean, if you go into old silent films like in the 20s, they didn't really have a score per se. It was like, a piano person who would go da da da, like if something was supposed to be shocking or if it was a scary, it was just like it they had the cues, but it wasn't as eloquent, I guess. It wasn't like there was an orchestra telling us to be sad.
Mhm.
And I think that nowadays silent films dwell a lot on that. And the films I focused on were horror films. In I thought it was interesting that watching, even if we wanted to talk about Quiet Place Part 2, they don't really dwell on score. I mean, like there's a score, but it doesn't feel like it's leading, like it's a more diegetic sound that they're using, like, the feet walking, and it's more like you're attuned to what's making noise in, you know, horror films because normally it's life or death situations. And so I think that is, to me, what a silent film is when we get the dialogue, it's important. Like, obviously, if we're going to speak in the next, hour and 20-minute film or hour and 30-minute film, and we only get 30 minutes of dialogue, obviously that dialogue is going to be important. Like, we need to pay attention to it. But I don't know. I think it's I like that it almost, we've taken dialogue for granted in its own way.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, it was a gift to cinema, talkies, that kind of thing. And now we're experimenting with taking that away. And I also like that. So, but yeah, do you think that silent movies have a place in today's film culture?
I think so, in a sense. Like, A Quiet Place has definitely shown that is a thing that you can do, but it's also because A Quiet Place, the whole point is that silence is the gimmick of the film. But it fits naturally because the idea is that if you make any noise, you will be killed by these giant monsters. So in a sense, like, that kind of movie could fit. I guess for me, the question is how many more movies can play with not having as much dialogue nowadays? Because as we said, we take it for granted. It's very easy to just make a movie with dialogue because that's all we've had for, nearly 100 years. We've had talkies. Silent film was just a very, very small portion of film history. And so nowadays I think you can make it work, but I think it has to be very, very specific and very, very intentional. I don't think you're ever going to see like a resurgence of movies like The Artist, where a bunch of people are just making silent films just for the sake of it, because even that was like a very specific thing the director was trying to do. He wasn't just trying to like.
Who directed that one again?
His name is like so he's a French guy, so I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing his name. I'm gonna try though.
I just saw that last name.
Yeah, Michael Hazanavicius, I think, is how you pronounce it.
All right, let me see if I can think.
You did about as good as I would have done. So
yeah,
I think you're on the right
Hazanavicius. But yeah, it's like he's not trying to make a cinematic universe of silent films here. He's just trying to make one movie. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think they can work. I just think that you have to get very, very creative with it nowadays, or people are just not going to be interested.
I think it's an interesting concept because, like, you're right, it is used as a gimmick almost. Like like, if we think about it, even Dunkirk was like advertised as being visually grand. Like, Dunkirk is about this one scene in history and dialogue isn't needed. Like, we know what's going on. We don't need someone to tell us what's going on. But like, I'm trying to think of like movies like what would we classify 2001: A Space Odyssey as a silent film? Like, where a majority of the film is just grandiose pictures and scenes with music attached to them. Would you guys classify that as a silent film? You two who have, are big 2001: A Space Odyssey fans, me who've only seen it once and could care less once the monkeys go away. So
the first 5 minutes, great. I don't know. I don't know if I would classify that as a silent film or mostly silent film, because I feel like it is kind of gets a little heavier towards the end of the movie. But
I mean, you would say the same thing about WALL-E. WALL-E starts out with like, what is it, 40 minutes of silent, like the character, there's no dialogue in the first 40 minutes of the film, except for like two robots kind of going like WALL-E and Eve, like, I think there are like 3 lines, like directive and,
yeah.
And we're using physical emotion. I was watching it again and I've only seen it twice in my entire life. Once I had to watch it for a class in college, and the second was for this podcast, and I forgot how much I cry every time I watch that film because I love that little robot and it's such a beautiful story. But it's I was watching it, I was like, it's almost Charlie Chaplin-esque, like slapstick comedy, like, he tells the story because he's emotive. And I thought that was a really interesting way of, you take a robot who has maybe like, 4 words to his name, and go, okay, let's follow him for an hour. It's a long movie. It's like 2 hours long. And I was wondering, how did it do so well? Like, for kids, it's not really a kids movie. It's a little heavy for a kids movie, I think.
Yeah, it's kind of a post-apocalyptic Earth situation.
I feel like it's more of an adult movie. I think it came out in 2008. So yeah, and I didn't see it until I was an adult because it had no interest to me as a kid, I guess. I mean, preteen. So I and then the other thing is, like, I was reading reviews on Letterboxd about people, like the joke reviews that are like, I went to go see A Quiet Place and a lady walked in, got in an argument with another lady, and they had to stop the movie because no one could sit quietly for 2 hours, an hour and a half. And I was like, that's the problem, is people can't sit in silence for longer than an hour. Like, it's a lot for them.
That's kind of what I was going to touch on, like why I think that John Krasinski wanted to wait till like enough people could be sitting in theaters together to like release this and not just put it on HBO, because I feel like now if you're like watching a movie at home, if like a lot of people put it on in the background, or they'll just like listen to what's going on and stuff and like not really be fully engaged. And I feel like you have to be like, just reading all of the subtitles for like ASL, or just like, it's something that you have to like give your full undivided attention to. And I feel like maybe that's why I liked A Quiet Place 2 better than the first one, because I didn't see the first one in theaters and I was just 100% there.
I am a movie theater snob, and as I grow older, I think I get worse. I saw Hereditary in an awful theater. Like, it was just like people just talked the entire movie and it ruined the experience for me. And then Midsummer, I had the same situation where I saw it with like a bunch of old people in like the middle of the day. And I was like, oh, this would be a great time because they'll be quiet. They talk the entire movie. And I just don't understand where movie etiquette like why we've suddenly just thrown out movie theater etiquette. And and I was like terrified because I was like, I want to see this film in theaters because I know how important the sound is and I know that I'm gonna get it full. Like, I loved seeing the first. My light went off. Oh. The battery must have died.
I saw that. We can still see you.
That's all that matters. So I was like, what changed? For audio listeners, one of my lights turned off. But yeah, I was so terrified because I was like, I'm not gonna have patience for this. Even in like my theater is like super like, it's not jam-packed full of seats and like they recline and there's like a wall in between your row and the one before it. But I was just terrified that I was going to have to like, I don't like shushing people in theaters, but I'm going to, because you know what, I've missed out on this experience for a year and a half. I want to enjoy it. Go watch something on HBO at home.
Yeah, please don't be that person, guys. If you're going to go to a movie, a lot of us have been waiting a year to sit in that theater and enjoy our popcorn and fully soak it in. Don't be that person who's on your phone or
don't
talking
be like
to the
my
person
theater.
But Ross and I lucked out. We were the only people in our theater.
Congratulations.
We went at a weird time. So like, I try and go on Sunday mornings, but we wanted to get lunch beforehand, and so we went at like 1:20. It was like a weird movie time because all they were showing was A Quiet Place, The Conjuring, and Spirit Untamed, which I think is a new movie.
Yes, a new Spirit movie.
I didn't know they came out with a new Spirit movie. Yeah, the horse. I remember the original. But yeah, like that's all they were showing, and so like 16 theaters were showing A Quiet Place. So we just went in like a weird time and it was perfect. And I was like, I guess this is how I'm going to have to go see movies now, is at weird times and, see them opening weekends when they're showing them 600 times. Oh, and Cruella. I haven't seen Cruella yet.
Me neither.
think I'm okay with not seeing it. I really could just wait
Same.
until it's
My
on
mom
Disney
really
Plus.
liked it. I don't know
really?
if that means anything at all, but
No, I think I had no interest. There were other movies that
yeah.
I was more interested in seeing this weekend, and yeah, I was so excited that it was just the two of us, because I kept going like, is it just the two of us in the theater? Like, and Ross was like, yeah, and I was like, oh, so he was like making fun of me because like I was jumping, and it's not like we talk, because I can't stand that. Like, I can't stand being asked questions, but like Ross turned to me and he was like, wait, I thought they only had 2 kids. And I was like, the other one dies in the first 5 minutes of the first movie. And they were like, oh, so it was kind of nice though to have a movie theater by yourself. So now I'm like, maybe I just pay $100 and have that experience.
Yeah, every time you want to go see a
Go see a movie, just pay for a private watch party. Cinemark actually has this thing where you can pay for a 2-hour game night and have
Oh
20
yeah, I saw that.
20 friends come play games. And I
I'm
was kind of
assuming you
like,
have 20 friends.
yeah, I was like, I have 4, but I will pay $200 for my 4 friends to play Mario Kart on a big
feel like
screen.
20.
But I was I'm sure Darrell, you had a different experience, because like
oh yeah.
Oh god.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
I had a really annoying experience. Like, we went to go see it opening night, and so we saw it on IMAX, of course. So of course that means it's lots of people. The way you're supposed to see it, the way God intended, a big giant theater with a huge screen, awesome sound, and so we're sitting kind of near the back row, and so basically everyone behind me, pretty much, especially on my left side, on the far left, and on the far right, I could hear people talking, and it's just like, will y'all shut up, please? Why do you come into this movie that's called A Quiet Place, and then you start talking immediately? And it's like, at one point, there's like a flash of light behind me, and I'm like, who's searching for something on the floor behind me? Why can't you just watch a movie? It was so annoying. It's like, God, I hate that. It's the most annoying thing. It's like, to your point, Grace, it's like movie theater etiquette just doesn't exist anymore. Apparently, you have to go at 1:20 in the afternoon to get lucky to watch a movie, and nobody.
Better the weekdays. I think I'm gonna.
I went
just
at
start going
9:30
weekday.
p.m. on a Thursday, and there was still at least like 4 or 5 other little like groups of people in the theater I went to. So
I just lucked out. I think this film relies so heavily on sound. I just don't understand, and visuals, because like you're watching it and there's the scene where they like kind of call back to the first one where she steps on the nail, and the little girl, I can't think of her name. Was it Reagan? I think.
I
Maybe.
don't know.
I
I
don't
don't. They don't say their names enough. I can't remember.
I don't remember her name.
Yeah.
I know.
I remember Lee.
Lee, and
Yeah,
I think
Lee.
like Ellen or something like that, I think is the wife's name, or I could be wrong. But she like walks down, like you have to be watching that to get that moment of like, oh, she's gonna step on the nail, like, and it just kills me like that. And I can't be mad, because like the problem is I like horror films, so like I love seeing horror films with groups of people, because sometimes I don't give the right reaction, because I'm expecting it, or I mean, we were joking that all I see is crappy horror films and not good horror films, because Darrell has seen more of the top 100 horror films than I have, but it's because I see a bunch of the crappy ones.
I only watch art around here.
I mean, like, I know in high school, like I went and saw horror films. Like I rewatched a film I saw in high school. It was called Prom Night, and I rewatched it, and I was like, God, why was I so annoying? Because I can remember myself just talking through the whole movie. And like, I know that's like such a very high school thing to do. You go see a horror film, on a Saturday night with all your friends. But, oh gosh, 14-year-old Grace needs to figure it out. But and maybe I'm just becoming a grandpa, and I just don't want to. like if I had my own home movie theater, I think I would probably be a happier camper because I think as long as I don't have to see movies with other people, but I want the sound and the theatrics of a theater, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Movies are
Ugh.
made for theaters. That's how they're made. They're made for big spaces. So it sucks when you try to go into one and it's just like, oh, everybody decides to talk. Oh, no one's actually paying attention.
You could
Like
just
the
go
only
to a coffee
time,
shop for that.
right? Like the only time I think you can are allowed to like talk a little bit or anything like that is when you're seeing like a new Star Wars film because like it's an event and everyone's like, oh
Yeah.
my god, look at that! Oh my god, it's so cool and stuff like
Hmm.
that.
I think Marvel
Or yeah,
movies,
or like
you
Marvel
know,
films.
but like it was more like people were standing up and clapping when Iron Man came out. They're like, yes,
Yeah, like
Iron
that
Yeah,
kind
Man.
of
no one's
stuff.
like just
Like I
having a
want that kind of
conversation about who's
thing.
picking up the kids after. Like,
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
stuff that.
No, it kills me. I'm gonna, I don't know, maybe we need to start a movement like quiet in your theater. Like even like the flashing lights on your phone, like when you get a text message, like I
So
don't I
distracting.
used to turn off my phone when I got into the theater, but now I can like put it on movie theater mode or whatever. And I'm like, I don't look at my phone. I've paid $12 for just me to see this. And
Hmm.
I spent $10 on popcorn and another $10 on an icy. Together for me and Ross, it's $50 to go to the movie theaters. I'm not going to go look up who played who until later, you know, or I'm not going to answer the phone, or it's too expensive of a outing and a hobby to let other people distract me. So it just irritates me when people don't have that same respect. I think that's where it irritates me, is that like I'm respecting your time in the movie theater. You should respect my time.
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
like, thinking about the people around you, not just yourself. And I think that's kind of the reason why, like, when it comes to like doing silent film in general, like that's the reason why it's hard to do nowadays is because people just don't pay attention and they don't
Mm.
care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do we have any other silent films to kind of like touch on? I know this might be a really short episode, guys. We're kind of filming this at a weird time, and like 10 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday, and we wanted to talk more. Like I would love to talk about Quiet Place, but I'm worried we'll spoil it. So we might do that a little bit later in the podcast. But before we talk about spoilers for Quiet Place Part 2, were there any other silent films we wanted to touch on?
Well, I think before like we go into A Quiet Place too, we could kind of stick on the horror film thing because I feel like that was the second point to like my answer on why or do silent films have a place today is I feel like they really do have a place in horror because like it builds that like tension and like you're just like what is going to happen and like you're just like kind of waiting for like whatever sound it is. So like a lot of horror films have a lot of like quietness and quiet moments in them. And I didn't see this movie. I saw the trailer though, but I know Grace did. Should definitely talk about Hush.
Oh my gosh, Hush. So it's a Mike Flanagan movie, and for those who know me, know that I have like, pardon the expression, a huge boner for Mike Flanagan and all his movies. And he's done Doctor Sleep, he did Gerald's Game, he's done Hush, he did The Haunting of Hill House. He is just the movie director to watch, in my opinion. I think he is he just gets it for horror, nerds like me. And I think everything he's put out in his entire career has been phenomenal to watch. He also did Oculus. I forgot about that one. That's the one with the mirror. And Hush is actually a film he did with his, I think it's his now wife. I don't know if they were together, but Kate Siegel, who is in The
In
Haunting of
Haunting
Hill
of Hill
House.
House, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
she's the one that like has she can feel things like people's
Okay, yeah,
energies.
yeah.
That's his wife, and she stars in the film, and they both wrote it over like a dinner date. Like they were like, oh, this would be really cool. So it's about a deaf and mute writer who retreated into the woods to live a solitary life, must fight for her life in silence when a masked killer appears at her window. And and to me, like, that doesn't do it justice, because one, it's John Gallagher Jr. who plays the bad guy, and he's the guy from the 10 Cloverfield Lane, the other one that
Who's
gets
not?
stuck.
Yeah, it's not John Goodman.
Yeah, the other guy that's not John Goodman. Yeah, and he's great. But it's so cool because he plays with, and the only other person I've seen do this is John Krasinski. He plays with like what is silent and what isn't silent, like moving in and out of the character's perception of, what they can hear versus what we can hear as the audience. And there's this like amazing, beautiful scene. Like the opening like scene is her making dinner, and it's like these beautiful like diegetic like sounds of like her chopping an onion, her sizzling some like stuff in a skillet. Like it's all these beautiful like, oh, like just wonderful sound design, and then it goes quiet, and you're like, oh, that's what she hears. She hears nothing. It's so great, and it has some great moments where she's talking in ASL, and she's teaching a friend of hers, and I think the movie's like an hour and a half. There's 15 minutes of dialogue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
15 minutes, and most of it is her talking to her friend for the first 2 minutes of the movie, and then the rest of it is the bad guy talking to her. And because like he realizes quickly that he can't hear, he's a cool bad guy, one, because it's kind of like the Stranger kind of style where it's like violence for the sake of violence, but also he has a cool trope where he uses a crossbow, which like isn't done ever in films now. Like I think that's really cool. Like and there's no exclamation of why he's doing this. She's just in the house, locked him out, and he's waiting for her to say she gives up. And it's a great film of just tension. Like it has like some of the like great like musical cues. It's not like an amazing sound design like where it's like orchestra or anything like that. Like it's no Quiet Place, but it and she just gives a great performance because like she's so emotive, and like you can see that in some of her other stuff. But yeah, I think that's a film that like I think horror gets away with silence really well because we rely on the tension of being quiet, because the killer is going to hear you or things like that. But like it gets away with having, so she like you hear her thoughts speaking to her, and so that's how she gets away with like telling you what she's thinking, and because she's a writer, so she that's how she like thinks, is she hears herself when she was younger. I think she says it's her mother's voice, but if you know the actress, it's her voice. So and but it's one of his earlier films. It's a 2016, I think 2016. Yeah, 2016. It's on Netflix. I saw it on Netflix. It's I mean, totally worth your time. It's only an hour and a half long, not even like an hour and 20 minutes. And you could throw it down in like an afternoon. And I totally recommend it just because I think it's got a great use of the idea of silence in film. And like and to hear it doesn't feel like a gimmick because the character is deaf and mute. And I that's why I like A Quiet Place too, is that he Krasinski uses the character who's deaf as an excuse to play with the silence and not being able to hear the animals or hearing herself make footfalls and things like that. I think that's a cool way to get around it being a gimmick. You know what I mean? Whereas like in other horror films, it's just silly. So, but do you guys want to talk about A Quiet Place Part 2? We want to go into spoiler territory?
Definitely. I'm gonna add a little something that like I feel like even in horror films that are by no means silent films, like a lot of times the silent parts of them stick out to me. Like in Silence of the Lambs when she's like in the basement and there's like,
Mm-hmm.
in the dark just walking around. Like that's what I always think about when I think of that movie, is like the quiet scene.
Oh, I love that scene. That scene when she's got the goggles on, or no, he's got the goggles on and he can see her, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
ugh.
That is kind of interesting how like movies in general like to play with that. Like any movie that takes place in space where it's
Hmm.
realistic and you can't there's no sound. It's not like Star Wars where you can hear blaster fire. It's just completely silent. It's always interesting when space movies or movies in general decide like, "Oh yeah, here's a silent moment. Here's where something is going to happen. You're not going to hear anything. And you're just going to have to live in that." Um, I guess I'm thinking of kind of like in Serenity, there are several scenes that take place, and it's like the Firefly movie. There's like several scenes where there's just silence as like explosions are happening outside the ship, and it's like really cool and different because I'm so used to hearing sound in those. So I don't know. It's like people can play with sound a lot in movies, and they kind of I don't know. They tend not to, but they can. They can get really creative with it if they want to.
I personally think there's room for silent films in horror. But that's always my opinion, is that horror is, the purest genre, and maybe we'll get into that another day. Uh, I'm just saying, like, a horror film revived the theaters. You know,
Yes, horror is the
Marketing.
master race of
Just saying.
film genres.
Just saying, horror has revived the theater with Quiet Place Part Two, and I think that it's a great film to revive theater. I think it's all, the film dominates on this like idea of hope, and I think moving forward even though there's tragedy behind you, and I think that's something great that we as a audience can relate to, especially during this time, pandemic and post-pandemic and things like that, and life returning to normal. It has a, or the new normal. I hate all the things that they're advertising to us. Oh,
Mhm.
we're in a new normal now. Like we're never going to be normal. It's that kind of thing. But on obviously this is a pre-pandemic movie. Like this was supposed to come out last year. I'm pretty
Mm,
sure, right? Wasn't
yeah,
the
it
original
was.
Yeah.
date like last summer or something like
It
that?
was like almost
Yeah.
exactly a year before.
It's
So
also really funny that like it all takes place in the year 2020. Like it came
Yeah.
out, the first one came out in like 2017, right? Or 18?
Yeah.
18. And it like took place in 2020. And it's like, oh, you really knew the world was ending, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
good on
And
y'all.
I think it's an interesting idea of like, isolation, and they play with all this like facts of, things that they didn't realize were going to be big moments and stuff like that. But yeah, so A Quiet Place Part Two. Do we want to go into a little synopsis of it and go from there?
Yeah, let's do that.
Sure.
All right, let's see. So A Quiet Place Part Two, which was released on whatever, like 2 weeks ago. Um it follows the events of the Abbott family. Now they face the terrors of the outside world because their home has basically burned down, because it follows literally, I think, 20
It's
minutes
like
after the first film. I don't
like
think
Not
not
it,
even
even.
like
yeah,
seconds.
yeah,
She
it's
like puts the gun down after it ends and then goes up the stairs.
yeah. And they're forced to venture into the unknown, and they realize that the creatures that hunt by sound are not the only threats lurking beyond the sand path, which it's an interesting concept of like, they've set like, in the first film they set the parameters of like, we can't leave this area, and now like they're gonna leave the area.
Yeah, because they have to because it's on
and
fire.
and it has so many interesting like, well, one, I love the cast. I think the cast is amazing, and I was reading that Emily Blunt didn't want to do the second one, and that kills me. Like that kills me to even think about that. She was like, oh, I thought the first one was perfect and I don't want to do the second one. and that John Krasinski didn't even think about doing a second one when he was making the first one. But it feels very natural. Like it doesn't feel like a forced sequel, which is kind of funny that we were talking about a sequel. Last week we were talking about forced
This was
sequels.
a great
It's a
one.
sequel to the sequels.
Yeah. And it felt just very like a progression of the story, I guess is the way of thinking about it. And it actually starts with a flashback of like right when the aliens attack. And that first like 5 minutes of the movie is so good because it sets the bounds for the rest of the film. Like it separates all the characters. It introduces you to another character in the first 5 minutes, and then it goes, okay, by the way, aliens. And like it still doesn't give you any explanation, which I love about the film. It's very like, you don't need to know why they're here. They're here. This is the issue. Pure panic.
Yeah.
And I think what is interesting is like all we know is what we learned in the first film, which is like that, they can use sound to hurt them. Like if we use this, earpiece and the signal and, all these things together, it can hurt them. And I like that, like, they're the only characters that know that, and they know how to fight them. And it has a great tension build in that first 5 minutes of the film. What did you guys think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like it's a great example of how, and again, kind of talking about sequels, it's like the power of a sequel because it starts out and you already know what's going to happen, but it starts out with like before everything goes down, and you just
It
have
starts
this
out as a
sense
prequel.
of, yeah, it's a prequel. It starts out as a prequel, and you have this sense of just dread. You're like, oh no, oh there's the little boy who isn't. Sorry, I knocked down my
He got
thing for
really
a second.
excited.
Yeah, like there's their little kid who is gonna be dead in like a couple of months or something like that, and you're just like, I feel so bad for them already. This is not gonna go well. They just think it's a normal day, going about playing baseball and having a good family time. Then a meteor comes from the sky, and you're just like,
Yeah.
no, 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 don't ruin their lives. But yeah, I love that. I love that you can just create that dread in a movie because you just know that like things are going to get worse. I find that amazing about sequels, and I find it amazing about movies because they have the power to do that, and when a movie does that right, it's really really good. Lots of foreshadowing in that first scene. It's just incredible.
Yeah, I really liked that scene as well. I thought it was like really fun to like watch those aliens just like go into a crowd and like wreak havoc, like because it's
Hmm.
so isolated in the second one. It was like really fun to just watch them tear into everything. Like the action was really fun, like that scene with her like backing the car up and the bus is coming at her was like
And the
amazing.
alien is coming out
Yeah,
of the
oh, it's
bus.
so
Oh,
good.
it's so good.
And then
Yeah.
the sound in that too was so cool. Like I loved them like playing tag with the sound with the little girl. Like it would just get quiet and you're like, oh shit. And then he'd like touch her shoulder and all the sound would come back. Like that was really fun and I feel like very impactful.
That's exactly like the right way to explain it with like tag, because that
Hmm.
scene, it becomes a totally different scene when you realize she can't hear anything. She hasn't noticed anything yet. Like when the cop car comes up behind him and like you can see the lights and he comes in and then the alien comes down and she hasn't reacted yet, and you're like, why hasn't she reacted? And you're like, oh, because she wasn't looking in that direction. And I think that's so cool, and I love that it she's a very humanized character, and I love her character, and I'm hoping this actress does so much more. Like I want her to do more for my sake, because I'm having so much fun watching her grow as an actress, because she was phenomenal
Hmm.
in this film. And like compared to the last film, like she's already like, it's only been 2 years and she's already become like an amazing actress, and she carried this film so well. um but like, oh, I love the experiments with the no sound versus sound, and like how they like, you're right, like tag it. It had some really cool editing shots where like they would like, oh, they had like this like weird shot where it was like in the car, out of the car, and like they like a blanket would go over the screen and would be in another section. It had some really cool like, or the flame. It was like he set a flame in one shot, and then 100 miles away she was setting a flame in another shot, and it was like it
Yeah,
was
lots of parallel shots like that.
yeah, it was really well put together story wise. And then you got Killian Murphy, who, is I love anything he's in, and he was just phenomenal as like the tortured soul. And it was interesting because like I talked to my husband, he thought he was gonna be the bad guy. He really thought he was gonna be the bad guy. And I was like,
Yeah.
he really was advertised as like gonna be the bad guy. And then you kept expecting it to be like, when is he gonna turn? And then you get to the spoiler alert, you get to the island, and then you're like, oh, these people are gonna be like cannibals or something. Like you
Yeah.
keep expecting there to be a bad thing, and you realize that the bad people we've already missed. Like there was this quick moment, and I wish we'd had more. Like that's where I hope the third movie comes into, because they have this whole scene of like these like, I don't know if they're cannibals. I don't know.
Yeah.
It was like the Cajuns. I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, down in the bayou. Like I don't
Probably
really know.
cannibals. Then.
Yeah. And like they like trap Killian Murphy with like the sound thing. And it's like a really cool scene and a great callback into like the only ASL he knows is the word dive.
Yeah,
And
that
which
was
he
cute.
learned
That
through
was
baseball.
great.
And I was
yeah.
waiting for it to
I
come
loved
up.
that.
And it was so cute. And them together were really good pairing. Like I
Yeah.
felt like it felt natural. I don't know.
I mean, it was basically like The Last of Us, but a movie. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's like it's Joel and Ellie, it's Killian Murphy and Reagan. So
Millicent
Millicent
Simmons is his name.
Simmons.
Yeah, that's her name.
Yeah,
She's
so
really
it's
cute.
it's just I thought it was funny watching. I was like, yeah, I've played this game and I'm loving it. I'm loving their adaptation of it. Who needs a TV show for this? We have this movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really think it I mean, like, I loved it. And especially because I think the last film I saw in theaters was Spiral, which is something that I already expected. Like, I knew what I was getting out of that. Whereas this was something I didn't know what I was getting. And hadn't seen a lot of the trailers, and I hadn't, I just trusted John Krasinski. And I feel like he's earned my trust as a director, that I'll watch whatever he makes now. I don't know. Do you feel like that for him? Like he's not somebody that I would have expected to be a trusted director, actor turned
Yeah.
director.
Like I was talking to Caitlin about this, like after we saw the movie, and I was like, this is really weird because like I never expected Jim from The Office to be not only such a great director, but he wrote the second film by himself. Like the original film was written by two other guys. It had a really like interesting style of a screenplay. It's like the most unique screenplay I've ever seen. Just looking at it, it's really cool. But he wrote this entire film by himself and he directed. I was just like, I how did you do
Get it, Jim?
It's like this is like it's ridiculous to me that this guy just all of a sudden like I'm a great director now. And I think that's amazing. So yeah, whatever he makes in the future, I'm very excited to see it. I love to see him grow because he's grown as an actor and now he's grown in a completely different part of that field. And I just think that that's so cool. I love it when actors transition to directing and they're like super successful at it. That's always
Yeah.
amazing to me.
Yeah, I'd be really interested to see him kind of go outside of horror and see what he could do with something like that. But yeah, just going back to what you said about like the boat people for a minute.
Ooh, that was a great scene.
It was. I feel like a lot of like post-apocalyptic things touch on this too. Like, watching like Walking Dead or even a lot of zombie things. It's like at first you're worried about the horde, the monsters and everything. And then it's like, oh, but like there are other people that will do anything to survive. So I do feel like that would be a fun direction to go if they're going to go with the third movie, which I will watch. And I hope it's just as good as the second.
I hope he has some, like, I hope it's him, not like, just because I think he's done such a great job with the sequel. Like, I think he'll know the characters enough to know where to take it.
Mhm.
And because like Ross, my husband, doesn't no, he doesn't. He's like, well, where do you go from there? Like, they found safety, they found what they can expect, that kind of thing. And I'm like, no, but we've learned a new mechanic that they can't swim. Like we've learned that, we keep learning new mechanics on how to get rid of them. So like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
do they get them off? Like, is it an isolated incident? We don't know a whole hell of a lot. I think they mentioned that I think they're looking at TV footage of like Singapore or something like that in the beginning of the film. So it's not an isolated incident to America or anything like that. But like, I think there's so much more lore that they could expand on, that I think it would be a
Yeah.
perfect trilogy. I don't know if it'll be as good as the second one. Like I almost enjoyed this one more than the first one.
Me too.
But and maybe it's just because I haven't seen the first one in a while. So, but I really enjoyed this one, and I'm super excited to get more from him as a director, and and Killian Murphy. If we can get more Killian Murphy,
Yeah.
I'm happy.
I was actually kind of like surprised finding out that they couldn't swim, because when I was watching the first one,
They
my
absolutely.
friend was like, "Oh my God, they can swim! Oh no!"
That's what I
because he, like
said
goes
when I
under the
watched
water,
it.
and I was like, "Oh yeah, that sucks." And then it's like, "Oh well, I guess because it was like standing
Yeah,
water,
they're just
he was
walking
fine.
They're just
He
underneath.
can't
walking. Yeah.
actually swim." But like, I was like, "Oh good."
Yeah.
When I saw that scene, the first one, it reminded me of like watching Aliens and thinking like, "Oh my God, they can swim!" Like
Yeah.
the way he went under the water, I was like, "Oh no, I don't like that."
Oh
I
no,
would
yeah.
like that. Always makes me uncomfortable just seeing something just feel like, "Whoop, go under the water. You can't see me anymore. I'm gonna try and kill you now."
I also think it's an interesting role reversal for female and male expectations in horror films. And this is just me being a dork with, my obsession with women in horror films. And I feel like they role reverse the kids and the expectations. They really set the tone of the fact that the brother is a little bit more anxious, and he's not as like, I guess, grounded as, the sister Reagan. And it's interesting to watch that he's the one that gets hurt. He's the one that has to stay behind with the baby and the mom, and she's the one that comes up with the stupid plan, and she's the one that goes out and does it. And I think it's a interesting reversal on the expectations of, you know, boys and girls in horror films. And I think that they both were brilliant in their roles. I thought that they the little boy, Noah Jupe, I want to say his name is, he was great. Like I loved watching him because I felt his fear. Like he felt like how I would have probably been in the situation, terrified the whole time. And like, if my ankle got snapped in a bear trap, I would have been done. I'd been like, no, I'm done. I'm done. And I can feel the pain in him. Like when he's screaming and she's telling him like, please don't scream. Please don't scream. Like that moment is heart wrenching. Like it's so hard to watch. And, I also love that, like, the whole family in the very beginning is using sign language. Like it's not like she's telling them to like breathe and like, and I love that it's very realistic, and that like, that's how they would communicate with each other, even if you could hear, and I just love it's a perfect I guess group of situations that just worked really well together. And I really love, like, I believe that they were a family, and I believe that, Killian Murphy would have been the neighbor, like like that. It feels like something like that I could relate to. Like if I was living out in the middle of Mississippi and a zombie apocalypse, Killian Murphy was definitely the guy that lived 5 miles away, like that feels authentic to me. Though I will say the whole scene with the little kid going to find the corpse was a little weird.
Yeah,
I felt
it kind of stuck out.
It didn't feel like, I was like, what is he gonna be like? Is he skinning people alive? Like what are you trying to tell me here?
What horrible thing is he gonna do? Oh
yeah,
he has his dead wife's body.
Like
what a
he
surprise.
just didn't have the heart to burn her or something like that, which makes sense because why would you create fire and heat and noise you know, to
Or
attract
take,
people.
or dig a
Yeah.
grave, and like all of that just sounds like more risking it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't make sense why he was like, I'm gonna go explore. It's like, no,
Yeah.
there's a baby. Go look
Yeah.
at the baby.
But it's such a child, like, I guess it's to remind you that he is a child, like, you know, he isn't a responsible adult. And I guess that's the whole point is, I don't know, but he does make, like, oh, it kills me when he traps himself in the thing and they're like both running out of air. And I'm like, that poor baby. Like, so
how dare
stressed
you?
out. But it kind of gives the mom that like moment of like hero moment, because she doesn't really get that in the first film. Like, she does because she gives birth quietly, which is in itself like her own hero moment. But this gives her like that like rescue, save her children kind of moment. So
and she's not in this film nearly as much anyway, so it
mm-mm.
definitely is like, here's your time to shine. Go
Yeah.
do something while your
Yeah.
daughter's off stealing the show, really.
Oh yeah, she steals the show.
Yeah. I also really liked the son's like redemption. Like, yeah, he was like the when he freaks out when his mom's leaving and she's like, it's okay, I showed you, and he's like, I am not raising this baby on my own if no one comes back. Like, he is just like terrified. And then that end scene where he like hears the radio, turns it up, and shoots that thing in the face. So it's like, yes,
oh,
you
so
needed
good.
that redemption, and like it was so good. Like, it was such a great end
Oh,
to like his
when-
arc coming into
when
what he needed to.
Freaking Reagan goes at it, which stabs it in the head. I was like,
Yeah.
yes, queen. It's
The
like
blood on her face.
oh,
Yeah.
so good. Like,
It was
she feels very Ripley-esque in Aliens, and I think that's
Definitely,
probably why I
definitely.
like her, is that I feel like she has this can-do attitude because she's been told she can't, you know. And I think that's why I love these films, is that like it's like a 14-year-old girl and she's leading this whole franchise, and she's the only one who is, I'm pretty sure she's actually deaf.
Yeah, she is.
And well, and like that in itself is like I'm super supportive of. Like, I'm so excited that we're finally realizing like, oh, deaf people can act, you know. Like, it kills me that like it's taken us until 2020 or 2018 to realize that. But it also is like such a John Krasinski move, where like he's like, oh well, yeah, naturally we would get someone who's deaf to act as the deaf person in
Yeah.
you know. And I think they the misconnect between Killian Murphy not being able to speak sign language and like her having to read his lips was really cool. Like, yes, we can communicate, you know, like just because we don't speak the same language doesn't mean we can't figure out, you know. I don't know. I just love the dynamic between the two. I think that they were great. And I'd watch another movie just of the two of them going off on an adventure. I don't know.
Yeah. I love to see The Last of Us Part 3.
Yeah. I feel like you really felt his pain too, because like he's like, I've already been through enough. Like, I lost my son, I lost my wife. And it's like, I have a lot of respect for your family. Like, you know, Lee was like a really good friend, and like he knew them so well. And like, just like,
y'all need to get the hell
he's
out
like,
of here.
you need, like, he's like, I can't help you and I can't watch you die. Like,
yeah. And I think that's such an honest apocalyptic answer. You know, there's not enough food, there's not enough water, like we don't have enough for you. And it's almost like he's had his own part one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
And like we don't need to see it because it's the same thing. He's lost his child, he's lost his wife, you know, and we don't need to see his, it's like basically if the roles had been reversed, you know, in the first one, if John Krasinski was the only person to live in the first film and all his family had died. It's basically like that. And I love the moment where he says, oh, I know I'm not your father, but you are. And that moment of like, I get chills just thinking about it, because like that's all she ever wanted, was to be like her father. And I think that hearing that is such a beautiful moment. And the scene is gorgeous, but two, because I think that's like right before all the world goes to shit or something like that.
Yeah, you really felt that in the first one, like how much she wanted to like be with her dad and be a part of that and like do the things that he was doing to keep the family safe. And he was just like, you can watch after your mom. So like, yeah, hearing that like from him, like you're so much like your dad was really good moment.
Yeah. I really liked it and I hope other people go see it. I think it's a great reopener for theaters. Because like The Conjuring is coming out both on HBO and in theaters, and it's killing me that we're still doing that because it's not helping theaters survive. Like I kind of was like, I don't want to watch it on HBO. I want to go see it in theaters. You know, I want it, and like even though they're like, oh well, you're still giving it money by watching it on HBO. I'm like, it's not the same.
Yeah, it's not the same. It's not even the same experience.
Yeah, and yeah, so I'm gonna probably go see it later this week, probably like on a Tuesday night. Um, but yeah, I'm really excited that we're kind of getting movies back again and the movie theater experience. I know Cruella did really well in theaters for like the family kind of style of, even though I've heard some like awful things about it, but I've heard that it still did pretty good though for like family units. So I think we need a good family movie to come out soon. I don't know when like the next cartoon is coming out or anything like that.
I don't even know how that's considered a family movie. I
guess Space Jam.
Space Jam, maybe. Is there a Disney movie coming out? I know
there's one coming out specifically on Disney Plus, Luca, but
I'm excited about that.
I think the next,
right,
I think the next family movie in theaters is going to be Space Jam, which is, if it doesn't get moved, July 16th.
Okay. What's early July? There was like something coming out like July 4th or something like that. What's the 4th of July movie? Do we know?
Well, it's not Top Gun. We know that.
Well, it was supposed to be Top Gun.
There's the Forever Purge on the 2nd and then Black Widow on the 9th.
Black Widow. Okay, that's it. So that's the next big, probably family blockbuster that we'll get, which I am neither excited for, but also I'm like excited for, but not excited for. Like I could care less.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way.
I'm like gonna go see it, but
I just want a new Marvel movie.
New Marvel movie, so I'm all for Marvel content. But 2, Florence Pugh.
Yes.
3, David Harbour.
And David Harbour, who is like, I love watching David Harbour act. So it'll be an interesting movie. And it's kind of weird because I feel like people's expectations are pretty low for a Black Widow movie.
Yeah, especially having to wait this long. No one cares anymore.
Yeah.
Like I feel like it should have come out right when, she died.
I mean, it should have come out like around the time Avengers came out, really. So 10 years ago would have been nice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I know we could probably talk about this more in depth. I'd love to talk about more modern silent films because I think there's just a bunch that we didn't cover. I'd love to talk about WALL-E more because I think WALL-E is an interesting film for Pixar and as well as Disney, which I don't know why I distinguish between the two nowadays. They're pretty much synonymous, but synonymous. Did I say that word right?
You said synonymous.
I can't say anything, guys. It's a Sunday morning at 11 a.m. and I am already over it. But it looks like that's probably about the time we have for this week episode. And the joke is now I actually mean it as I have to leave in about 20 minutes. But my name is Gracie and you can find me at Gracie May with a Y and 3 E's on anywhere you see fit. Darrell, where can we find you?
You can find me at Twitter at Darrell, as in Vader, Sidious, or Maul. Take your pick. And Darrell, Darrell. Also you can find me at Letterboxd at Darth Darrell also, I think that's what it is.
I'm pretty active on Letterboxd. I don't know about you guys, but
yeah, I've been using it a lot recently.
And Sarah, where can we find you?
I am on Twitter, snotty_person, and mostly on Instagram, snotty.person. Also Letterboxd, just snotty person, and all of those are snotty with an IE instead of a Y.
We definitely have some interesting usernames in our world. But for a normal username, you can check us out for the latest movie news at the Popcorn Bucket List on Instagram and at TPB_podcast on Twitter, or just find us on whatever social media you use and tune into our YouTube channel if you want to see our beautiful faces or see my camera die constantly. We'll be uploading the video version of the podcast on Fridays. Yeah, my camera died in the middle of that, and I'm not going to redo this. So, yeah. All right, guys. I'll see you all next week, okay?
All right.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.